being face to face with people matters. So I know you go out there when you can, and members go and knock on doors, and I can't imagine that the power and the importance of that has let up at all. Face to face is very critical.
Hello and welcome to Illinois Corn TV. I'm Lindsay Croke. I'm your host today, and I am joined by Mark Lambert, who is the former Director of Communications for Illinois Corn for many, many years, and also Communications Director for National Corn Growers Association. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's good to see your face. It's been a while.
It has been a while. We had so much fun together, but let's jump right into some of those early years, Mark. I want to know what you remember. I'm sure a gazillion things about the Illinois Corn Office, like back when you started. What was work like in here?
Well, I tried to think of kind of one general area that I could mention, and it's a big one because even though corn growers have been around for a long time, it was very different back then. We were in a much smaller space, had a much smaller staff. I mean, 6 or 7 people was kind of a full complement at that time. But one of the ones that really will date me is that when I remember when I showed up for my first day of work, that there was one computer in the office, and the person that was doing the bookkeeping for corn growers had that computer, but she was doing double entry, doing stuff by hand and also using the computer. I'm like, well, that's just silly, and I need a computer. So the next day I stole it. Um, so that's a pretty big change, compared to where we are with technology today and how fundamental the whole digital world is to getting your message out.
Yeah, that's one of my other questions is to really think about like the way that you did communications back in the heyday of your career. I mean, your career spans several decades, but and think about how we do communications today. And I'm curious if you think there are like themes or principles that applied both then and now. What can we learn from what we used to do? What should we keep around? What's your perspective?
The key things in communications, it's all about people. And yes, the tools on how we reach them today are different, but it's about engaging people with a message that is going to get their attention. And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. I remember from even my first day going through the door with corn growers, Illinois corn growers was always very good at not being afraid to be different because, small staff, small budgets, big world. If you wanted people to hear what you had to say, and a lot of it was very important, we tried a lot of different things to stand out from the crowd. Sometimes it was downright silly, and sometimes it was a hardcore wake up call they didn't want to hear, but things that needed to be addressed. So I think it's still a people business. Talking to people directly is always a good thing. You need to get out there when you can, but in today's fast-paced world, I mean, it's just you've got to pretty much use everything and have clear, consistent messages.
Your comments make me think of a postcard that I was before my time, but I remember, and it said "No tanks, Iraq," and it was like "No thanks, no tanks." Uh, Talk about like kind of being in your face, being a little risky. I love it.
Yeah, that was kind of in the early days of the unrest in the Middle East, and that was a little edgy. The agricultural world tends to be a bit conservative, but boy, people embrace that. We put thousands of those things on people's cars, and it had a very clear cut message. We had some issues we needed to face with energy, and corn growers had a solution in ethanol, and that bumper sticker made that point.
I think that's something you were always really good at is just like the really catchy like headline and really snappy message that just had a few words that was easy for everybody to remember.
I think there was a pretty big adjustment period when I first came in because of that. As I mentioned, it tends to be kind of a conservative world, and I'm not opposed to using a full complement of directions with messaging. And if to stand out, sometimes you just got to be different. The board got used to it. I think they even came to enjoy some of the things that staff came up with, and I think you guys are still doing that today. The postcard was a good one because we were trying to get key messages to growers. And somebody finally said that there's always that long walk from the mailbox. And, that's what that first few seconds, 10, 20, 30 seconds, we might have their undivided attention. So we started doing the postcards and found out that people were reading them, and it was kind of a home run, and I bet it still works.
Yeah, we still do a lot of postcards. And, increasingly, I feel like this story of agriculture gets more and more complicated, especially when you're talking about policy initiatives. There's so many pieces of that to really boil down and help people understand if they're going to call their congressman and be effective. Um, so yeah, I just really covet your skill set and like really boiling down something and making it really simple. We're trying to do that today. I hope we're pulling it off, but I also really appreciate sort of the personality of our association being willing to be out front and risky, and I think you have a lot to do with that.
Well, thank you. But another thing, that I didn't mention in terms of the early days that was different is corn growers were always really good at doing the work in the building. The staff did a lot of the heavy lifting, and even though, over time the staff has grown and I know you've got an increased budget, I'm sure that's still a big part of what you do. It allowed the impact of the organization to be so much larger. We were very fortunate and we had a tight staff and people had a very clear goal and worked a lot of hours to make things happen. We kind of did the best we could, and I think we did a pretty good job.
I think so too. I think amazing foundation was laid for my work here, and I'm so grateful. So, what were some of your favorite projects you worked on during your tenure at Illinois Corn?
Well, there's some very public ones that people probably associate with me. We went to a trade show many years ago and saw somebody wandering around in this really over the top alien bat suit. And myself and the executive director, Jack Fisher, were watching the crowd reaction to it. And we kind of looked at each other at the same time and said, hey, we need one of those. Not meaning a bat creature, but that was kind of the formative day that Captain Cornelius came to be. And we created that character, did some comic books for kids in school just to give them a positive message about corn at a young age. So that was, it was very high visibility in the grand scheme of what we were doing. I would say not super significant, but as I said, communications is about covering all the bases. So that was a big one. One that I think was very effective and critical and important, and I wouldn't say it was fun like Captain Cornelius, but it was a very solid idea, was the Corn Farmers Coalition. The message was simple. We did a lot of research and found out that the average person didn't believe that family farmers existed anymore. And in the corn industry, that was 98% of the people. So the confidence they had in family farmers, the way they did their business, what they meant to the country, what they contributed, it was all huge. So knowing that that's the way they felt about farmers, even if it was in a historical context, we needed to bring them up to speed and say, hey, we're still here. And yes, you're right, we still matter. And then once you had that platform and that attention, you could base a lot of messages off that. And it was largely focused on Washington, D.C. Because if there's a group of people you want to know that family farmers still exist, Congress was a pretty good place to start.
I would say we're still yielding the fruits of both of those campaigns now. Captain Cornelius is still around. In fact, our current comms staff here are just really into Captain Cornelius. I feel like we breathed some new life into him. He appears on social all the time, um, and in terms of the family farmers, this message, the work in DC, for the foundational work in DC continues, and the family farmer message continues, like with We Are the 96, which, I really think in 20 years, when maybe somebody wants to interview me about my time here, that'll be one of my proudest programs. So I love that we have that in common, Mark. It's a good message.
It was a very novel time. That's when I mentioned that taking a step back and looking for different angles is key to communications. And we went to Washington, D.C., knowing that we had a budget and we wanted to reach a particular audience. So what's the message going to be? What's the best way to reach them? And that was the challenge, really, to our staff, was to do that. And I was being shown around out in Washington things like advertising potential at the airport, billboards, all kinds of things. But the one that really hit me, there was a station on the House side and the Senate side where people came to work through the subway system, through the metro. And so when they talked to me about, you could buy these ads all over the metro system, I'm like, how about these two? And what's it going to cost to buy every single thing in the place? And by the way, can we add more stuff that's never been there before? I made some people in Washington, D.C. very happy because of some of the new advertising techniques like 3M materials you could stick on things. I mean, we had 10-foot ads on the floor when they got off the escalators. It was over the top of the archways. It was literally a sledgehammer approach. Limited budget, limited time we could be there. But by gosh, we wanted to make sure that they knew we were there. And we did it every spring for a number of years, and it worked.
Yeah, I remember that was early on in my career, and we would have the farmers featured in those ads showing up in their congressional offices, and they were being recognized like all over the House office buildings. It was a fun moment.
Yeah, it was. And I think politics were less partisan back then, but there was still partisanship. And one of the things that they crossed over the aisle on frequently was corn farmers. They wanted to visit with our people when they came out with the members, and they wanted to hear the message and decide if they could do something to help you. So I don't know that it's quite the same anymore. I'm sure you guys are facing some challenges that I can't even imagine.
Well, I guess that's my last question here. Are there political or advocacy lessons that still apply today? We're in this whole new world, but I'm interested in your perspective on that.
Well, you know, being face to face with people matters. So I know you go out there when you can, and members go and knock on doors, and I can't imagine that the power and the importance of that has let up at all. Face to face is very critical, and not to sound cliche, but the number one rule of politics is get reelected. I know that hasn't changed.
That has not changed.
So a membership organization like the Corn Growers is key because numbers count. And I know sometimes that people don't have the time to get off the farm. Maybe they can't serve on the board. They can't go to DC, but they can pick up the phone. They can send an email. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Put a key message in there. Let them know what you're thinking, because oftentimes it's terrible to say this, but it's all about counting heads, and your head matters. So stick it in the game. Do what you can. It doesn't take that long. 30 seconds to send an email saying, "Hey, this is affecting my farm. Here's how. Let's see if we can address it." I mean, it's not rocket science. So that's just to encourage people, get involved, stay involved, because it does matter.
Yeah, I think that's a barrier for our farmers. They feel nervous about calling their congressman, but really, you're their boss. They want to hear from you. Call them, tell them what you think. And like Mark says, it is about really just counting heads. So I'm in support, I'm against. That's really the point of the phone call.
That's right. And sometimes I think people, maybe get frustrated that they may not be reaching their congressperson or senator directly. If you could build a relationship with those staff people, sometimes it's more important because you can reach them more frequently. And that personal contact is very powerful.
Yeah, you are so right. Well, Mark, right here, before we head into my favorite segment, not to be corny, I'm curious if you have one or two special memories of staff or farmer leaders, or, I don't know, want to give any shout outs to any past contributors or volunteers?
I, I wrote down an entire list of people, and I know I'm going to forget somebody, but um, just in general, one of the big strengths of Illinois corn that makes it stand out in the world of corn grower states has been leadership. And I could rattle off officers and presidents and a lot of people that were very important. I'm old enough. I go back to the days of Jane Lane and Kent Chidley on the corn grower side. Work closely with people like Joe Hampton, Eldon Gould. I mean, it's a long list. Um, and they all had a lot in common in terms of why they were there. They were trying to make a difference for family farms, and so that's been the universal thing. And I think it's key to driving what you guys do and what you're trying to accomplish even today. I work very closely with presidents because of the communications angle. So, people like Doug Wilson and Gary Niemeyer, Lynn Corzine, Martin Marbury. I mean, it's just those people went on to do a lot of things after corn growers because they were so invested, and I'm sure there's some of them are still doing things in the industry. So, yeah, it's pretty important. One name I will mention, and that's Randy Atkins. He was involved for a while and dedicated a lot of hours, and he got up to where he was going to be president, and he actually had cancer during his presidency and died shortly after. Um, but he wanted to fulfill that role. That's how much he believed. He was a good one.
We are so lucky to have the farmer volunteers that we have, everybody who's so committed to the work. By the way, anybody watching this, all volunteers, no payment, literally volunteering hours and hours of their time to do media interviews, go to meetings, show up and lobby, all the things. Yeah, we would be nothing without our farmer leaders.
Is one thing in closing, and you were asking about things that were memorable. One of the biggest things that I did, and I think one of the most important things, oftentimes goes unrecognized, is I love doing media relations. I came from a newspaper background. I spent a lot of time developing relationships with the media. I was constantly driving that in with the rest of the staff, is that when that door opens itself and you have a chance to tell our story, you got to do it. And it's not always fun to do, but I think that was huge. And I know you work very hard at that today, and that's why you guys are as well known as you are.
Yeah, that is, I mean, to me, it just goes back to where we opened this interview with, which is face-to-face communications, building relationships, being somebody that people can count on, being an organization that people can count on. And every staff person here has their role. Every farmer volunteer has their role in helping us have that expertise and that responsibility and that credibility. And that's why we're impactful.
Right. Exactly.
So,
Well,
and
I should have said that.
and Mark, I learned that all from you. So thank you so much for training me up for this role. I'm having the time of my life. So let's lighten it up. Are you ready to be corny?
Sure, why not? It's what I do best.
Okay. All right, here we go. What do you call someone who works at an office, but whose name does not appear in the org chart?
Somebody that works in.
I have no idea.
A legend. And that's you, Mark Lambert. We're going to close with that. You are an Illinois corn legend. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. And just really appreciate all the cheers and hurrahs and encouragement that you give to us, even still in your retirement.
Well, thanks for keeping up the good fight.